Brendan, you are a parent of a student of a kid on the autism spectrum, and your son has an individualized program through the Department of Education. I'm saying this. I know you're okay with us talking about this.
Yeah, thank you.
How do you feel tonight?
Scared. I've looked at the numbers. Anne Arundel County, that's my county in Maryland, where my kids in public school, got $18 million last year from the Department of Education. So that's about half of the support that they give for special education. I have to say they do an amazing job. He has said in his announcement eliminating the Department of Education, which, by the way, doesn't seem to be legal, that they're going to spare special education. Nothing about the chaos that we've seen in every aspect of this administration gives me any kind of reassurance that there will be any kind of continuity there. And if we are looking for things to rationalize and things to cut, the idea that we would eliminate a department and a crucial part of that funding would not go away strikes me as absurd. And I don't have any assurance whatsoever that there won't be some kind of a disruption. What I do think is interesting was the fact that as they're rampantly cutting everything, they recognize that this is important. He is not a man who is given to caution. He is not a man given to carve-outs of the things that he wants to eliminate. But he felt it necessary to stand on that podium and say, we're going to keep this stuff. How? What department? Under what authority? Where's it going to go? We don't know the answers to any of these.
Brendan, when you've got special education teachers, right, who in my opinion are angels among us, okay, when they're protesting, you got to pay attention. Peter, the White House's argument has been what they're really doing here is returning education authority to the states. A lot of us could buy that. But the question is, do we know if the states are going to get more funding out of this? Because that's the whole game.
Yeah, that's the real question, right? Exactly. So you want to return education authority to the states, but there is a funding source that comes with that authority. And the question is whether Trump is trying to actually talk about authority or talking about money. If they're talking about saving money, the idea is to cut this department to save money. That has an impact on local schools. Of course, it has an impact on local schools. And local school districts and states will have to therefore either make up the difference or cut programs and make those hard choices. The thing that's really interesting about this, or one of the things that's very interesting about this, is this notion of returning authority to local school districts. Is something he's giving voice to by signing this order today. At the same time, his administration is trying to tell colleges and universities, as well as local schools, what they should be doing. So it's one or the other, right? They're telling Columbia, for instance, the University of Pennsylvania, they're telling individual school districts about DEI and other programs, other ways of approaching education. They don't want them to have certain books and so forth. And at the same time, they're saying the federal government should be allowed to tell these institutions what to do with their policies. He's saying, actually, I'm turning authority back. And it's kind of there's an inconsistency there that they haven't really explained.
Yeah, they're saying let's get big government out of our business unless that business is a law firm we don't like, and let's sign an executive order against them. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But I want to stay on the DOE, Joyce, because the teachers union says they're going to sue. What do we think that's going to look like?
So I think we'll see that lawsuit pretty quickly, talking about the president exceeding his authority, because after all, this is an agency that was created by Congress during the Jimmy Carter administration. Carter signed it into law, but Congress passed the bill. And as they say, Congress giveth and only Congress can taketh away. So this is one of those areas where there will be a strong argument in court. But, you know, for those of us who read Project 2025, there was a conversation about how to destroy the Department of Education in that document. The chapter on education was 44 pages long. They might want to slim down the department, but they had a lot to say about how to do it. And the strategy involved cutting it so dramatically that there was very little left, and then going to Congress and asking Congress to put an end to it. That's the strategy we're seeing Trump put into play today.
But, Peter, doing away with the DOE is not MAGA or Project 2025 specific. Republicans have been trying to do this since Reagan.
Yeah, no, that's true. Ever since Carter signed that bill that Joyce has talked about, this has been a priority for conservatives, no question about it. But it's interesting. The history here is interesting. Ronald Reagan, nobody made a bigger deal about it as a president than Ronald Reagan did. He came in right after the department was created. He said he's going to eliminate this and the Energy Department, which was also created during Carter's tenure. And he did neither. And why did he do neither? He had a Democratic Congress, and he believed that you had to have Congress to undo what Congress does, which Joyce has talked about. He didn't try to do it through his own executive fiat. Ronald Reagan recognized that the presidency has limits. He recognized that his power could only go so far. And if Democrats weren't going along with it, he didn't waste his time waging some sort of battle that wasn't going to go anywhere on Capitol Hill anyway. And so while he promised during the 1980 campaign, he pretty much dropped it pretty soon after getting into office. Here we have a president who has promised to do this with a Republican Congress, a Congress that in theory might agree with him. And yet rather than go to Congress and say, hey, we all agree that the Department of Education isn't necessary, that it's an extravagance, that we should have state and local control, which is in theory is the Republican philosophy here. He's choosing to do it through the stroke of his own pen. He's choosing to exercise what he says is his power to at least strip the Education Department down to its bones, even if he can't completely get rid of it. Why do that when you have a Congress that belongs to your own party? And it suggests a certain degree about his view of presidential power and who should be running things in this city, whether Congress has any role or not, even with his own party in charge.
Tony Soprano doesn't wait for Paulie and Christopher.
I mean, it's not just Reagan. Every Republican candidate since Reagan has promised to cut.
So this could have been something they do together.
Do you remember Rick Perry famously forgot that he wanted to kill the Department of Education? That's the oops moment. That's the department he forgot. He was going to kill energy and Department of Education, but he couldn't get there.
He forgot to study.
But Peter's absolutely right. I mean, the challenge that we have here is democracy. You can say that you want to cut the Department of Education, but it turns out that people actually like it. And when you go to Congress and you say, this is what you are putting at risk, this is a system that barely works, that with the best efforts of special educators and teachers and parents all working together and therapists, this is a system that barely works, and we're still trying to make it work. Why would you throw that into risk? The answer is nobody has been willing to do it in a democracy. The only way you can kill it is if you're going outside of that democracy.
Okay, or how about it's not working? Okay, cut it and then do something. The big question for all of us is, what is that something? Joyce, new topic. Let's talk about the deportation flight case. The judge said that the government was evasive in answering the judge's questions. How big of a deal is this?
It's a big deal. The way the judge is now framing this case is he's demanding that the government turn over information because he's considering whether they violated his earlier order. That clearly is a signal that he's contemplating some form of sanctions, maybe contempt sanctions, but he has his teeth into it. He doesn't have any intention of giving the government a pass just because it's the government.